Before we get started, there will be spoilers for the 1000-Year Blood War arc of Bleach in the video to come. Alright, I admit it. A video on KON, everyone's favourite mod soul, stuffed into a lion plushie, whose name may or may not mean King of New York, is long overdue. On a channel dedicated to discussing Bleach, it's about time we took a look at the series' mascot himself, and after seeing quite a few comments asking for a video like this recently, well, how could I say no? Now, KON really is everything you'd want from a mascot. He's iconic, with a simple yet striking design that's totally synonymous with Bleach. He's cute, he's easily marketable, and to top it all off, he's extremely perverse. Wait, what? Well, it's true. One of my favourite things about KON is the way the character feels like an oxymoron, blending surface-level family friendliness with a seedy, more adult-oriented nature hidden within. That's not to say KON's totally a bad guy though, far from it, and the pacifistic reality of the character actually helps him embody a core theme of Bleach: the heart itself. That being said, despite his inherent ties to both Ichigo and the Soul Society, there is no denying that as the world and the narrative of Bleach expands far beyond the four walls of Ichigo's bedroom and later the streets of Karakura, KON gets left behind somewhat. In many ways, KON and his animal visage represent the innocence of the earliest days of Bleach, when the story was focused on intimate human issues as Ichigo and his closest friends tackled monster of the week style plots. There's an innate wackiness to KON that doesn't really jive with the way the series grew with its readership into something bigger and darker than ever before. For the most part, KON has always been a light-hearted character who brings levity to every situation he's in, a character who really suited the relative low-stakes hijinks of the first arc, but who began to find his relevance waning as time went on. While Kubo does make a notable concerted effort to remind the audience that KON exists every now and then, it turns out there isn't much room for a talking plushie in the midst of a world-ending war between Shinigami and Quincy. However, despite that truth, KON's an interesting character to look at. If we compare him to the subject of our last Bleach Forgotten Characters video, Tatsuki, then I think we see characters that find themselves in similar situations, but with markedly different expectations levied at them, both narratively and from the community. Where Tatsuki was concerned, I approached that video from the perspective that I felt she was totally underused and had so much potential. Tatsuki, if given the chance, could have played a far bigger role within the wider world of Bleach. KON is sort of the opposite. While I think he certainly could have had a more active role, I don't necessarily feel he was underused, nor that he needed more to do. That being said, considering his proximity to the main cast, it is clear that he was left behind by the time we moved away from the start of the Arrancar Arc or so, as evidenced by the gigantic span of the story in which KON is completely missing. So, in this video we'll be taking a long overdue look at KON, the series mascot and a character who plays a unique role within the cast of Bleach, one who gave us a fascinating insight into some of the more mysterious aspects of the series in the beginning, and who helped set some of the earliest world-building blocks into place. Maybe for a character like KON, that's worth enough on its own. And so as we begin, I think it's fair to say that KON is unlike any character in Bleach. He has a perspective totally his own, and that's something you really feel during his introduction. Thanks to KON, we're treated to some early insight into the shadowy nature of the mysterious Soul Society before they're even properly introduced, quickly highlighting that this is an organisation with very questionable morals, a group that won't hesitate to wipe something out when they see fit, helping to effectively set them up as an antagonistic force, even before the likes of Uryu Ishida are introduced. Thanks to this, KON is quickly established as a character of multiple facets. Yes, he seems silly and juvenile on the outside, but actually when you go back and reread his introductory story, his entire character and premise is tinged with both tragedy and a desire for justice. KON, short for Kaizo Konpaku, is the last of his kind, the final mod soul, after the rest were all exterminated when Project Spearhead was terminated. The project, which saw modified souls implanted into human corpses to resurrect them and bestow them with extreme, almost superhuman physical attributes, was designed to help the Shinigami combat the growing hollow threat. However, the project was eventually thrown out, due to probably very legitimate questions over its unethical nature, and KON, whose pill somehow found its way in with the regular Jikongan instead, was accidentally spared the fate of his fellows. Since that time, KON believes that all life is precious and won't kill anything, having lived in fear of his own destruction for so long, watching and waiting as his brothers and sisters were picked off one by one around him without a care for their own existence. As a result, KON believes that all creatures should have the right to live and die freely, a right he believes that he too deserves, giving the character a surprising amount of emotional maturity and depth. While I enjoy KON's role as the resident comic relief dispenser, it's a shame that this element of his character is almost entirely left behind once his small arc is over, and bear in mind that KON's story is essentially totally complete within the first 2 volumes or so of Bleach. But that anguish KON felt, at least on the surface, is mostly forgotten, replaced exclusively with comedy. Again, I don't mind that. The anguish side of this character isn't something we necessarily have to dwell on, and it's safe to assume that after being granted his life by Ichigo and Rukia, who managed to rescue him after his brief rampage, that KON's arc is complete and we can safely move on. And I do think, for the record, that the character fits into the comedic role very naturally. But the character suffered real torment, with the threat of death lingering over him for a long time, only for his freedom and subsequent capture to be wrapped up in a few chapters and then seemingly dealt with almost as quickly as it came. KON is an underpod classification mod soul, meaning he has greatly enhanced leg strength and is a capable hand-to-hand fighter when in the right body, while also able to clear incredible heights in a single leap. Again, this is a pretty cool and unique aspect of his character that we never see again really after the Agent of the Shinigami arc is over, after he is basically in a plushie almost full time. All of this is to say that KON as a character very much fits the bill of the Monster of the Week style storytelling of Ichigo's earliest adventures, fighting hollows in Karakura town as a substitute Shinigami. KON was introduced into the story out of necessity. Kubo needed to find a way to occupy Ichigo's body whenever he became a Shinigami, and there's no denying the mod soul is a clever answer, creating a fun and likeable character while solving a world-building problem at the same time. But ultimately, it does mean that once Ichigo's adventures expand beyond the boundaries of Karakura and into the spirit worlds proper, KON's usefulness on the whole dries up, which leads me back to my earlier point of comparison to Tatsuki. It feels like KON deserved better as a character just like she did, but unlike Tatsuki, I'm not so certain here. Did he deserve better? Did he deserve to play a bigger role, whatever any of that really means? Or does he accurately fill the role he was actually introduced to play, and is it really needed to expect any more from him? It feels like he should be around a lot more, certainly, and truth be told, his time in the source material does span the entire stretch, with his first appearance being in chapter 13, and his last being, well, the Hell chapter. So perhaps Kubo felt he found the perfect place for him after all. As for KON's character design, well, there's not much to say. He's green, he's round, he's a pill, basically. Alright, I guess there is a bit more to him than that, I suppose. After Ichigo finds a suitable home for KON inside of a stuffed lion plushie, the KON we all know and love truly awakens. And I don't think there's any better word for him than iconic. KON is completely synonymous with Bleach, and is the series' mascot for a reason. Kon's design is the perfect mix of outwardly cute with inwardly devious, and he's routinely hilarious when those two sides don't quite match up. Whether he's lusting after women as this tiny lion creature, or enraged for one reason or another, Kubo contorting the plushie's face into all kinds of brilliant expressions is always a delight. From his stubby paws and pointed mane that somewhat resembles the sun or a flower, to his single button and jagged tail, Kon is goofy, yes, but purposefully so, and Kubo truly captured the effortless simplicity of a child's doll. And yet, despite being confined to a lion plush toy, Kon's design is remarkably pliable, and he's able to work in scenarios outside of just comic relief too. Whether those scenes call for genuine emotion or gravitas, Kon is able to rise to the challenge. Overall, there's something special about Kon's design. It can't be understated that he is everywhere in the world of Bleach, in Bleach marketing, and is easily one of the most public-facing aspects of the entire franchise, and that's likely because he is so adaptable. His design is simple, yes, but considering what he is, he's got the advantage of never looking like anyone or anything else in the source material. He truly stands alone, and he's instantly recognizable. Honestly, it sounds silly to devote such time to a little plushy doll, but his design is excellent. And of course I'd be remiss in not mentioning perhaps his greatest form, Buff Kon, which saw him randomly gain the extreme physique of a bodybuilder in the 1000-Year Blood War arc from time to time. Again, it's simple, it's hilarious, and it works. Anyway, let's take a look at Kon's role in the story. Despite his role being most prevalent early on, he does manage to make a smattering of appearances throughout the series. In this sense, he's never really a forgotten character per se, though he does seem to crop up at almost totally random intervals before completely disappearing again for a massive stretch of time, sometimes without explanation. And some of these disappearances are a little more egregious than others, as we'll get into. So, like I mentioned earlier, Kon is brought into Bleach to fix a couple of problems in the Agent of the Shinigami arc, namely allowing Ichigo to turn into a Shinigami freely without Rukia's help, and then animating his otherwise dead body once he does so. Rukia heads to the Urahara shop, an outpost for Shinigami in Karakura town disguised as a candy store, where we meet the shop's strange and shady owner for the first time. There, Kisuke sells Rukia a dispenser of soul candy featuring a duck design called Yuki, the second most popular of the dispensers because the one Rukia wanted, featuring Chappie the rabbit, is the most popular and was unavailable at the time. Back at school, Rukia forces Ichigo to take the pill, and his soul bursts out of his body. However, rather than leaving his body lying unconscious on the floor this time, Ichigo's body is now inhabited by a regular artificial soul, or so they think. As Ichigo and Rukia leave to deal with the Hollow's Kon, now in control of Ichigo's body, appears to have sinister motives as he prepares to make the most of his newfound freedom and ability. We then see back in the Urahara shop that Kon came from a box of defective Jikongan, which is a little weird when you think about it. The fact that Kon seems duplicitous is initially inferred to be because he is defective and from that defective batch. But if he was placed into a box of broken Jikongan and labelled as such, then presumably someone tested him at some point to come to that conclusion. And if they tested him, surely they would have realised that he was a mod soul, not just an artificial soul. Anyway, Kon begins his rampage, testing out his powers as he smashes through a metal fence with his foot with ease. Also, wouldn't that break all of Ichigo's toes? Even if Kon does have the power to do that, I don't think Ichigo's human body can suddenly withstand it. Kon then shocks a teacher by casually leaping over his head before causing trouble in Ichigo's classroom, springing up to the 3rd floor window. This next sequence of events is pretty funny. Kon is wowed by the beauty of the girls in Ichigo's class, particularly Orihime, and attempts to make a move on her before even kissing Tatsuki after seeing her up close. This obviously shocks everyone, as far as they're concerned, Ichigo is doing all of these things, but it sends Tatsuki into a blind demonic rage as she begins demolishing the classroom. And despite everyone thinking Ichigo has seemingly lost his mind, Orihime is certain it wasn't him, though she can't explain why. Kon later comes across 3 students in Karin's class playing video games outside. When the boys joke about deleting their characters, Kon is overcome with emotion and attacks them, breaking their games before running away. Despite this, he does return to rescue them from a hollow, working alongside Ichigo to defeat the creature. Seeing the 2 Ichigo take down this hollow is honestly really cool and very novel, and as someone who has read the entire series many times over, it is easy to forget that this is Kon we're looking at here as he plants a well-aimed, powerful kick into the Hollow's face. However, as the Hollow's body falls, Kon leaps into action to kick it away from a line of ants, telling Ichigo that he believes every life is precious and he doesn't want to kill anything. Urahara then arrives and attempts to retrieve his defective merchandise in order to destroy it, but Ichigo and Rukia step in to rescue Kon, claiming responsibility over the mod soul they purchased. Afterwards, they find a suitable body for Kon, a stuffed lion toy, which he brings to life. Honestly, I wonder where this would end. Could you place a Jikongan inside literally anything inanimate to bring it to life, or does it have to vaguely resemble an otherwise living creature? Like, could you put a Jikongan through, say, I don't know, like a postbox, and it would transform into Kon? I have absolutely no idea how that would work, but it would be kind of funny to test it out. Now, in his familiar appearance, Kon begins accompanying the team around, often stuffed inside a backpack. As Ichigo battles Grand Fisher, Kon helps Rukia move Ichigo's sisters away from the fight scene before imitating him to help reassure and calm down Karin. Once they're safely away from the battleground, Kon asks Rukia to go and help Ichigo in his fight. Eventually, Kon grows sick of his living conditions after Ichigo and Rukia violently attempt to clean him up, and he decides to make it on his own out in the wider world. We then get basically an entire chapter dedicated to the misadventures of Kon in Karakura Town, which is very refreshing and absolutely not the sort of thing that you would ever really see in any arc outside of the Agent of the Shinigami. Running away from a home, Kon's misadventures result in him being brutalized all over town. He finds Tatsuki and Orihime, but is accidentally swept up in the middle of their game, causing him to be sent flying into the sky on the back of a football. His cover is blown when some of Ichigo's classmates accidentally step on him, causing him to run. I assume his skills as an underpod still transfer to the plushie, which is how he can sprint so fast. Dejected, Kon decides to return to the Kurosaki clinic where he's rescued by Yuzu, though after she dresses him up he begs to return to Ichigo and Rukia. After Uryu begins his contest with Ichigo, we do briefly see Kon's abilities once more as he rescues Rukia from a pig hollow, kicking it in the side of the head and sending it flying. And then later everyone looks on as a colossal Menos Grande arrives. As the Agent of the Shinigami arc comes to a close, Kon is later found strapped to the underside of the Kurosaki family toilet, his mouth bound with tape so he can't tell Ichigo of Rukia's decision to leave and face the Shinigami who have come for her alone. Together, Kon and Ichigo decipher Rukia's letter and realise where she has gone. When Ichigo goes to help Rukia, Urahara leaves Kon in Ichigo's body at the house, and Kon wonders about the shopkeeper's hidden motives. Finally, as Ichigo prepares to leave for the Soul Society, Kon meets Orihime, Chad, and Uryu properly for the first time, revealing his existence. Although Kon demands to come with them to the Soul Society, Ichigo leaves him behind, asking him to take care of his family while he's gone. And honestly, with that comes an end to Kon's real relevance in the story. Right here at the crest of the Soul Society arc, you can see the issues facing this character already and why it's hard to keep him around. Ichigo simply doesn't need Kon with him when he's in a spirit realm like the Soul Society. And so, from this point onward, a lot of Kon's storytelling is done through sketches that appear at the ends of chapters, detailing what he's up to while away from the action. And so, during the Soul Society arc, this is the only way we ever actually see Kon, and it's only a couple of times at that. While Ichigo and the others are away, Kon loses his stuffed lion body. He's invited to play a game of football with some kids after they see him kick a stone with his incredible leg strength, yet when he arrives, he realises Jinta has his plushy body on him as a good luck charm. Kon attempts to grab the lion, but Jinta retaliates by drawing his bat. However, Tessai arrives to stop the fight, but tears the lion toy in the process. After he's returned to his body, Kon participates in his Radio Kon interviews, which was a fun way for Shonen Jump readers to interact with and interview characters in the series via mail-in letters, exposing Kon to even more prominence beyond the fourth wall and continuing to push him as the face of Bleach. And then he even ends up taking over Hanataro's body at some point in the Soul Society, getting himself into trouble with the 11th Division. When we then arrive in the Arrancar Arc, Kon actually returns to the story for a bit as things settle down in preparation for the war with Aizen and the Arrancar. Kon rages at Ichigo about his lion body being torn in one of my personal favourite visual gags from the story, with Ichigo looking terrified at the almost demonic state of Kon's body. It's a brilliant way to open the chapter, and I also love the way Kubo later mirrors it in a following chapter by having Kon look all dainty and dolled up after Uryu has fixed him. When Ichigo goes off to fight some hollows, Kon takes over his body and heads out into the town at night. Grand Fisher, who has returned as an imperfect Arrancar, discovers Kon and, thinking he's Ichigo, viciously attacks him, demanding that he turn into a Shinigami. Luckily for Kon, he's rescued at the last second by Isshin, revealed to be a Shinigami. Isshin tells Kon that he's always known he wasn't Ichigo, revealing that he never once called him by his son's name while he's been in his body, while Kon looks on in disbelief, barely recognizing this man as Ichigo's dumb old dad. Later, a heavily depressed Ichigo returns to his room, where Kon asks him about his father, only to quickly remember Kisuke threatened him into remaining silent about what he saw. Desperate to backtrack, Kon quickly tries to cover up his slip of the tongue, but Ichigo isn't listening anyway. Kon is briefly present when several of the Hitsugaya advance team visit Ichigo's house, and he attempts to lunge at Matsumoto, only to be quickly put down. Finally, after Ichigo disappears to train in secret with the Vizards, Kon, once again all dressed up, looks after a tearful Yuzu, quietly scolding Ichigo for making his little sister cry. It's a very brief but really nice scene for this character, helping to once again show that more tender side to him, that side of him that really cares about those who are vulnerable, and it's nice to get that reminder. After Ichigo completes his Vizard training and battles the Arrancar, eventually heading to Waco Mundo to rescue Orihime, Kon is missing from the story for a truly massive chunk of chapters. And this is really where the argument for him becoming a forgotten character is most obvious. If we don't include his appearances in the chapter sketches again, as he does show up there once or twice more, Kon isn't seen in Bleach for 299 chapters, which is totally insane. That's almost half of the entire series. It's especially weird when you consider that no one even seems to notice he's missing. The next time we hear from him is in the form of those chapter sketches during the fake Karakura Town battle. Kon, as with the rest of the residents of Karakura Town, is sent to the Rukongai as part of the Tenkai Ketchu scheme. While pretending to be unconscious like the rest of the town, Kon is discovered by members of the 12th Division. When a beautiful woman approaches him, Kon falls into the trap and dives towards her, only to be ensnared in a device that bursts out of her chest, because why not? After this, Kon is taken to the Research and Development Institute to be examined. Honestly, this is pretty cool. When Kon shows up later on in the 1000-Year Blood War arc, it is easy to think of his reappearance as being totally random, but if you've been paying attention to these small sketches, then it is clear where he ends up and where he's been all this time. What I don't understand is why Ichigo never thinks twice about his disappearance, never even goes so far as to mention this character, which takes us into the Lost Agent arc. Now, since Kon has been captured by the 12th Division, he doesn't appear in this arc whatsoever. I guess Ichigo could simply think that Since he lost his Shinigami powers, the Soul Society decided to take Kon back, as there really was no use for him there anymore. But that is kind of weird, because they've shown no interest in Kon after Ichigo and Rukia claimed responsibility over him back in the first arc, and Rukia did buy him, as she points out to Urahara, and I can't help but feel having Kon around would have been a real boon to Ichigo's well-being during this time. To be honest, for as much as I like the Lost Agent arc, it is a fairly easy arc to break narratively. I think all you need is just one person around to tell Ichigo what's going on with the Soul Society, and Ginjo's plan kind of falls apart. Characters like Yoruichi, who again is conspicuously absent in this arc despite the fact that she really should be there. That person could have been Kon, but he is tied up, so that's just too bad, I guess. Kon doesn't reappear properly until chapter 516, after the first Quincy invasion is complete. And it does make sense for Kon to make a return, as Kubo was making a concerted effort to bring in all of these disparate characters from all corners of the Bleach universe to come together against the burgeoning Quincy threat, which is one of the things about the final arc that I absolutely love. Ichigo is in the Research and Development Institute with Mayuri discussing his broken bankai when Kon suddenly crashes into him out of nowhere. Ichigo is shocked to see this mountainous figure, not recognizing Kon in his new muscular state. Buff Kon has arrived at last. Mayuri restores Kon to his original form, and the plushie travels with Ichigo to witness the arrival of the Zero Division. There, it's revealed that Urahara also experimented on Kon, placing a communications device inside his head, apparently without his knowledge, which is accessible via his eyes. Mayuri captures Kon again and tries to shut down the link, but fails. When Kisuke implanted this communications relay in Kon, I have absolutely no idea. I guess it could have been during the Soul Society arc, it could have been during the Waco Mundo arc. There's probably plenty of opportunity for him to do so, but that is exactly the sort of thing Kisuke would do without anyone knowing. So we've only been reacquainted with Kon now for a couple of chapters, but already the mod soul has been put through the ringer. Luckily for him, things are about to get a lot better. Sort of. When Ichigo heads to the royal palace, Kon sneaks along for the ride, hiding in Ichigo's robes. If you had told me back in the Arrancar Arc or something like that, that one day Kon, of all characters, would make it to the royal palace, I probably would not have believed you, but here he is, he's come a long way. I have no idea how Ichigo doesn't notice him, considering he gets undressed for the hot springs in Tenjiro's palace, but there you go. There's a throwaway line about him hiding in Ichigo's robes and how he was excited about the hot springs, but when he saw it was nothing but a bunch of men, he decided to remain hidden, but I still think it's pretty dubious. When Ichigo and Renji head to Hikifune's palace, Kon's trickery is finally discovered mid-flight. Kon transforms into his buff form, and the two Shinigami use him to soften their landing, crumpling him on the ground. In Hikifune's palace, she treats them all to a sumptuous meal, including Kon, which does make me laugh. There's something oddly wholesome about this little lion toy eating food somehow, but he's really enjoying it nonetheless. Anyway, he digs into the banquet along with Ichigo and Renji, the three of them devouring Hikifune's meal. I guess what I like about it is it really makes Kon feel like one of the gang, which is just really funny when he's this little lion toy. Honestly, thinking about it though, with them eating the food that Hikifune has prepared for them, it would have been a stroke of brilliance for Kon to also undergo some kind of royal palace power-up of his own. After all, he ingests the divine dinner, so does his Reiatsu not change at all? He must have some kind of Reryoku since he's able to see spiritually aware beings, or does it not really work like that with Jikongan? But you can't tell me you wouldn't have loved to have seen Buff Kon absolutely wail on some Soldat at least once during the final arc. Maybe we'll get that in the anime. However, after Hikifune reveals her slender form, much to everyone including Kon's surprise, she explains that she was the one who created the concept of the temporary soul and the ability to insert it into a body. And so, from her invention, the Jikongan, and by extension Kon himself, was born. This is a cool piece of lore, though I've always had a weird feeling about it. I feel like we always knew, or knew for a long time before getting this revelation that Hikifune created the mod souls, or the idea of them at least, but I don't see how that's possible, considering she's only mentioned in the Turn Back the Pendulum arc. Unless there was some information Kubo gave in an interview or something that I read many years ago and it just stayed in my mind ever since, or I'm wrong and this is literally the first time ever we've learned about that truth. Either way, Kon travels with Ichigo and Renji to Oetsu's palace, where he's ecstatic to see that it's filled with gorgeous women, only to have his hopes and dreams completely crushed when he and the others are shown the way to Oetsu's real home. Another joke I've always really liked is when Kon desperately tries to return to the glitzy palace and Oetsu agrees with him, believing that he and Kon have an understanding. Much later in the arc, after Yhwach captures the Soul King Palace and battles Ichigo in the throne room, Ichigo and his friends are sent flying from the top of the battleground by Uryu, rocketing down towards the Soul Society. Although they are rescued by Orihime and Yoruichi's quick thinking and abilities, Kon suddenly erupts from inside Ichigo's robes once more, transforming into Buff Kon and sending Ichigo flying backwards, causing him to smack heads with Orihime, who has a famously hard head by the way, knocking Ichigo out cold. So presumably, this means Ichigo has had Kon inside his robes the entire time he's been fighting during the second invasion. Does that mean Kon tanked Candice's Galvano javelin, or was he completely protected by Ichigo's Oken clothing? I'm assuming the latter. Either way, upon discovering Kon, Ichigo bullies him until Yoruichi begins talking about their plan of attack, though Kon threatens to go muscle mode and beat Ichigo up in return. And that's the last we see of Kon in the source material. He disappears for the rest of the final arc, though we can at least assume this time that he is in Ichigo's robes for the remainder of the battle. The funny thing about that is Kon must go through some serious beatings. Is he poisoned by Askin? Is he injured by Yhwach during the final battle after Ichigo himself is viciously wounded? When Ichigo's robes are a little more ripped towards the end, there's no sign of Kon in the front anymore, but maybe he's scurried round to the back. But yeah, that is it for this character. Kon is another character who I feel like could have easily been included in the epilogue, so it is disappointing not to see him there, especially since he lives in the Kurosaki Clinic, so I don't know why he doesn't feature in the very last chapter. Regardless, while Kon does disappear again for the final 60 or so chapters, I do appreciate Kubo at least attempting to keep him around in the 1000-Year Blood War arc, even though Ichigo doesn't need him at this point. And speaking of that, presumably Ichigo's human body is left at Urahara's shop after Everything But the Rain, because Ichigo comments on being in his human body when he arrives at his house to speak with Isshin, but there's no sign of Kon because he's in the royal palace. And then after Everything But the Rain, Ichigo instantly returns with Mera to the royal palace, back to where Kon is. So I assume when she takes Ichigo back, he instantly reverts to his soul form, leaving his unconscious body back with Isshin in the human world, who then, I guess, presumably takes it to Kisuke's shop to avoid Karen and Yuzu potentially seeing it. Thankfully, however, despite that being Kon's last appearance in the original story, he does return in the Hell chapter in a really nice way, allowing his role to continue. Ichigo and Orihime's son, Kazui, has apparently taken a liking to Kon and hangs out with him during the day. On the night of Ukitake's Konso Reisai ritual, Kazui, who had only been pretending to be asleep when Orihime checked on him, opens his window to head out into the town. Kon tries to stop him, but ends up going with him, the two of them travelling on the backs of a pair of spectral fish to visit a lonely soul in Karakura town. Kazui, who has been taking these souls to a certain somewhere, takes this soul to a shrine in order to help him pass on. As Kazui opens a horrific mouth-like portal, Kon and the soul look on in shock at what awaits them beyond the gate. Unfortunately, for now, that's all we have, but it's clear that Kon has gazed into what I can only assume is hell itself, and is terrified by what he saw. As I theorised in a previous video, I think a villain from hell has somehow managed to get in contact with Kazui and is manipulating him into sending souls there. Perhaps it'll be Kon who alerts Ichigo to what's actually going on after he's seen it for himself, Or maybe KON will be stuck in hell and the arc will be about saving him. Maybe this will be KON's arc. Either way, that's it for our walking, talking, perverted lion plushie doll. As Bleach's mascot, KON is afforded a certain level of reverence, and this is a video that, as I said, has been long overdue. Quite a lot of you were asking for this, so I hope you enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun to make. And as we reach the end, I want to double back round to the question at the centre of the video: did KON deserve better? Is he truly a forgotten character in the same vein as other missing characters in this series, like, for example, Tatsuki, or does he fulfill his specified role perfectly? I would argue it's a little bit of both. KON serves his role well, but it is a role that's really only relevant at the start of Bleach. There's almost like a sort of forced obsolescence there where KON is concerned. And as a well-liked character, it is great to see him return every now and then, even if there's not much he can do in the grand scheme of things. Though again, I contend that he could have beaten up some Soldat in his buff form. That would have been really awesome to see. KON's ability to inject levity into any scene he's in is appreciated, and he represents the wackier side of Bleach, which is why it's good to see him sprinkled throughout the 1000-Year Blood War arc, as that arc gets pretty heavy, so it's nice to know he's not totally forgotten. And with him already appearing in the Hell arc, his future could be bright. But that's it for the video, guys. As always, I really hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts about KON down in the comments below. Do you enjoy this character? Do you think he's a good, suitable mascot for Bleach? And do you hope to see more from him in the future? Could he have been used differently in any of the arcs, maybe in the 1000-Year Blood War arc? Whatever you think, let me know down in the comments. I would love to know. And as always, I want to end the video by saying a massive thank you and giving a huge shout out to my wonderful supporters over on Patreon. I really do appreciate each and every one of you so very much. And if you like what I do here over on YouTube and you want to support me on Patreon as well, you can do just that to get your name in the credits like this and to get every video I release absolutely ad-free. Alright, but until next time, guys, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.